notice has been given to the public as a result of the property being physically posted, the correct property being physically posted, and being identified in each case by the correct address. I found a case where the wrong property was posted. And I mean, the notice was driven in by state on the wrong property, and that was correct. That's not what happened here. I think anyone who had any confusion after seeing the posting of the property or seeing references to the address, if anyone had any confusion, if they went so far as what at least one of our citizens did to check the parcel number, they would at least know that they need to inquire of the town to confirm.
Excuse me one time. We fixed it. Oh, you are live with sound.
Wow, okay, we're back up and running again.
All right.
Don't delete that though.
Thank you, Mr. Redford.
All right, so we can feel better about that.
Yes. much better.
Additionally, just for the record, I'm going to point out that we have a fair minimum of members tonight, and we did offer to the applicant that given that under our rules, 2/3 or 2 out of the 3 members who are here as a quorum will be required to grant a variance that the applicants would be welcome to ask for a continuance if that's what they wanted and they elected to go forward. So I'm just making that statement on the record. But the process that we're following is that we're going to hear, just for the record, we've already talked a little bit about the notice requirements, but Ms. Hinks is going to point out what we did to notice the meeting. We don't need to go into the item as I discussed, but she'll indicate for the record what publication requirements we met. And Ms. Hinks will be here to answer any concerning questions that come up during the course of the meeting. I'm hearing a speaker.
It's the laptop.
Okay. All right.
Because it's on delay from what is actually recorded.
So do we need that to be?
Is it?
I fixed it. I
Okay.
fixed it.
All right. Okay. Very good. So as I said, all the witnesses are going to testify under oath. We're going to hear first from Ms. Hinks. We're then going to hear from the applicant, and we will then invite the applicant, maybe 2 individuals, and then we're going to invite anyone who wishes to speak in favor of the application to give testimony. And then we will then turn to those who may wish to offer testimony in opposition to the application. Those offering testimony are invited to give their comments, but it is not a question and answer session for the board or any of the other town representatives who are here. This is your opportunity, whether you're in favor or opposed to the application, to state your reasons. And the reasons need to be related to what the courts have deemed to be the appropriate considerations for determining whether a variance should be granted. And they are to apply a standard asking whether strict application of zoning regulations result in exceptional practical difficulties of ownership. And I'll explain that a little bit further. So to determine whether an exceptional practical difficulty is met with respect to an applicant seeking relief from an area restriction, this board, and I say this for the benefit of the applicant, I say it for the benefit of anyone else who wishes to testify, and for the board, because it's been a long time since we've met. During the course of the deliberations, if we get to that point, this board is urged to rely during the deliberations on considerations which are deemed to be appropriate and not matters which are not. So my goal here is to advise the board and anyone who wishes to participate in the process as to what appropriate considerations are and are not. And they are the nature of the zone where the property lies, So we'll be considering that this property lies in the NR zoning district, as I understand it, that it's appropriate to consider secondly, the character and uses in the immediate vicinity of this property. And I would be happy to remind anyone what these standards are during the course of the evening. Thirdly, whether removal of the restriction on the applicant's property would seriously affect neighboring properties. So we would invite testimony as to whether removal of this restriction either seriously affects neighboring properties or does not seriously affect neighboring properties. And finally, whether failure to remove the restrictions would create unnecessary hardship or exceptional practical difficulty for the owner in relation to the owner's efforts to make normal improvements to the property. So this is a key consideration. This factor is satisfied only when the difficulties alleged by the owner are practical rather than theoretical and exceptional rather than routine. And it's here where the board considers whether an applicant is seeking more than is minimally necessary to relieve the asserted difficulty. The board is generally not permitted to consider factors other than those four, which again relate to the zoning district, the character of the area, the effect on neighboring properties, and whether the applicant faces an exceptional practical difficulty of ownership. So by exclusion, that means that we don't want to hear testimony from those that may be opposed to the application on the grounds that there's some personal animosity or any kind of consideration other than these legal considerations. That's not an appropriate consideration for the board. I state that every month in Kent County. I'm not anticipating that in this case, but I represent a couple of boards of adjustment, and that's an admonishment that's given in all those cases. So once we once we get through with a little introduction on the publication from Ms. Hinks, we're going to invite the applicants to speak, at which time, after each witness, the board is invited to ask questions. Once that question and answer session is completed, we'll move on to the next witness until we finish. There's not to be any cross-examination done by any of the individuals who are present tonight of any of the witnesses. The back and forth will be exclusively between the board and the witnesses. And then following taking all the testimony, this board will then deliberate over whether to grant or deny the variance or to grant some sort of modified approval of the variance. At that point, those deliberations are going to be done in open session and will be consummated by a voice vote at the conclusion of the meeting, and then we'll adjourn. After that, there'll be a period within, I believe it's 30 days, that a written decision will be issued, and this, the final decision of the board is considered to be that written decision that comes following the hearing. Any questions about what I just said? No. Okay, could we ask Ms. Hinks for the record just to indicate what publication and notice requirements were given in connection to this application?
Yes, sir. On August the 25th, 2021, I posted in front of 109 Houston the sign. I have a copy of that particular sign. I have it in picture form. I also have the notice. It was also sent out, the same information was sent out in letter form to each of the surrounding neighbors on the August 25th, so that they would be notified as well. It was posted on our website, that is the Dewey website, that there was going to be an appropriate meeting here on this date. And then I forgot, there's the last one. And the newspaper, yes, thank you. The Cape Gazette, the town clerk, Kate Banizak, sent an email requesting that the Cape Gazette publish a notification for tonight's meeting.
And that was published more than 15 days in advance of.
She sent it on,
But it was published.
Yes.
Yes, by the Cape Gazette,
Okay.
more than 15 days.
Correct.
All right. So unless there are any questions, I think at this point we can hear from the applicant, one at a time.
My name's Tracy Meter.
So we're gonna need, let's see, we don't have a mic up there.
Can we move those up there? Okay.
I didn't realize that one turned around. Maybe it can be pushed out in such a way that, yeah. Slide it out. Yeah.
You want to bring it out?
Just this one, just so that got room to get.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Okay, Tracy, you're up.
All right.
Yep. So you can, so everyone can hear you and we can have to swear you in and all that good stuff.
Right, so we'd start with name, address, and I will swear you in, please.
Yeah, Tracy Meter, and the address is 309 Sweet Street, Rehoboth Beach.
Mr. Meter, do you swear or affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Okay, very good. I don't know if the pack pages are numbered exactly the same as page 4, is that page 4? And then the sketch is page 3, is that correct? Okay, so some of the things I'm going to speak to first pertain to page 4 and page 3. So page 4, you can see the typical lot on the left, which is 50 by 100. And you can see there called out on the bottom what the buildable area is. So on the right side of that page, then you can see 109 Houston Street. Similarly, what the buildable square footage there is. A couple of things I like to note out here is both the uniqueness of the size and shape of that property. Noting that typical lot is 5,000 square feet. This lot is a little under 3,600 square feet, which makes it 28% smaller than the typical lot. Also, that rear property line is something else, and that rear property line is adjacent to Highway 1. It doesn't show it on page 4, but on page 3, you can see that on the plot. And so there also on page 3, you can see that that rear property line is 75.48 feet in length, and that's 51% greater than the typical lot. And then also the resulting impact in terms of your square footage with regard to the 12-foot setback then is roughly an additional 52% of area. I believe it's 912 square feet versus 600 square feet.
Could you repeat those numbers, Tracy? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So in terms of the lot,
Just the last, no, the
The
last
last one.
numbers, yeah.
yep. So a typical lot is 600 square feet with the setback, so 100 by 50 lot. And then in this instance, because of the length of that rear property line, it ends up being 912 square feet. So I've had the good fortune to talk to both Dawn and Jim as this process is unfolding. We've discussed the property and some different things about it, and discussed the intent is right now the residence is non-conforming because it encroaches on the west boundary and then also on the northeast boundary. And the intent of this project is to replace the foundation. It's aged, it's the original foundation, probably from the 60s or 70s, so it's due for replacement. And also along with that then is to reposition the home on the property, making it conforming. So from a hardship perspective, we don't wish to tear down this property because of the cost associated with that to build anew, and also the uniqueness and the character of the home. So we'd like to improve upon that and standing with the neighborhood as well. I know it was mentioned earlier, keeping in light of the character of the residents or the neighborhood. So that would be the intent of this as well. further on the discussions that we've had about this, the minimum variance request is to move the home and make it conforming on all sides would be the 7 feet. So that's the reason that we derived it 7 feet, and it's not 2 feet or it's not 10 feet. Initially, when we had discussed it, it was a little bit less than it. Again, I talked to Jim about the project, and they recommended to move it 7 feet. Or I'm sorry, to make the variance request for 7 feet.
And Jim is a reference to Jim Deedee's.
That's correct. It is.
Any questions?
So I have some questions for the
Okay, thanks.
applicant. Maybe if I ask a few questions.
Yes, yeah, thank you.
So you mentioned that the home is non-conforming, it's legal non-conforming. Is that because the home was built prior to zoning?
It was, that's correct.
Do you know when the home was built roughly?
I would imagine in the 60s, but I'm not certain.
So how long have you owned the property? Or how long has it been in its current ownership?
Since probably the mid-80s.
The page 3 that you supplied, in my copy of it, I think it's been photocopied a number of times, and even with my magnifying glass, I had some difficulty. But the left-hand side, as you face the property, is the closest portion of the structure to lot 8 to the left. What is the distance there between the structure and your lot line?
I think it's 5.1, I believe. May I step over? Because I have a cleaner copy, which hasn't been photocopied. You might be able to see it on this one a little bit better.
Yes, I can. So it's, thank you.
So that 5.1 I referenced was near the front. Sorry, I have to point it out because I think there's also a shed on there, which is obviously much closer back here. But that's the 5.1.
All right, thanks. I'll give you that back. So how, can you estimate how near is there a home on the lot to the left or to the west of your property?
There is.
And can you estimate, or maybe you even know how near that home is to your lot line, your shared lot line?
So I don't, but they just built that home, so I assume it's at the setback would be my guess. 8 foot, I believe.
So you guess it would be at approximately 8 feet. And before I forget, I'll ask and I'll ask this of Ms. Hinks as well, or ask her to offer this information at a later date. But are there any public safety considerations that are that arise as a result of moving this home near to coastal highway? So is it your testimony that would not cause any difficulty in viewing that intersection, or difficulty getting out on coastal highway, or have any effect?
No, I don't believe so, and predominantly for the reason you mentioned earlier with respect to the misrepresentation of the ad or the lot call out, right? So there's a lot on that corner, a smaller parcel, right? And then in addition to that, the highway department, when they did the expansion and put in the sidewalks and things, they put a fence along there, a taller fence anyway.
Okay, thank you. So I know you touched on this, but and I know apparently from your testimony you consulted somewhat with the town. But what is the difficulty that you're facing that causes you to bring the application forward? Why not just replace the foundation and put the house back in its original footprint?
So we'd like to have it, put an addition on the home as well. And I think we'd like to be conforming on that east side and on the northeast side. So that was the intention.
So where's
the west side and the northeast.
Is the addition reflected in any of your submissions that you're seeing?
So there's a couple of sketch pages in there, and again, they're not building drawings, but they're sketch pages 5 and 6. And so in those, you can see the configuration of the house there, the second story with the gable roof, right? That's the existing structure in essence. So again, those aren't construction drawings, they are just sketches.
Okay, could you help me understand then where, so I'm looking at page 5 of 6.
Mhm.
It looks like there is is that reflecting on the right-hand side of the peaked roof, the area that would be an addition, or is that part of the house as it exists?
Well, it would be an addition, however, with the repositioning of the property, right? It's not a change to the current footprint of the structure. Right, so the house is gonna move to the east, right? So the addition on that east side is in essence where that footprint is. Once it's repositioned, the house is within the boundary, within the setback on the west side and within the variance then as is granted on the northeast side.
Yeah, okay. I guess I'm not understanding it completely. I mean, I know what you're saying, but I guess these sketches show the existing house, correct?
No, they do not.
Okay, where I'm confused. So where portion is actually the new addition that's expected if this variance is granted and you go forward with the addition?
So it would be the first story and then under the 3-story part, and then it would be the right part where the porch is, or the deck is on top and beneath that.
Okay, that was thank you.
So the existing structure right now in essence is if you take away what is the first floor in that picture,
Gotcha,
in essence, that's what its existing structure is right now.
okay. So it looks like what would be, the first floor, because you're basically looking to raise it up essentially, correct? Looking to raise the structure. So, but according to this sketch, it doesn't look any bigger of a footprint. So I guess I'm a little confused.
So it would be conforming then
Gotcha.
is the difference. So right now, it's non-conforming. It's only 5 feet away from the property line on the west side, and then also it's non-conforming on the northeast property line. And so the footprint of the house doesn't change, however, it would be conforming on all sides.
Okay, makes more sense. Thank you. I was getting it, but I wasn't quite there.
How would it be conforming on the west side if you replace the existing structure with a new structure?
So it would move to the east. So the structure where it sits now would move to the east. And that would make it conforming. So on the diagram that we showed you, or I showed you, it had 5.1, of course, that would go to 8 feet to be conforming on that side.
Gotcha. And then it would be non-conforming, but made legal if the variance was granted on the coastal highway side.
That's correct.
Right.
And that's why I say the footprint doesn't change. It's a matter that it would then be conforming on all sides.
Do you have any questions, Phil?
No,
Okay.
doing a good job. That's good.
Okay. Dave, do you have any questions?
Well, if you look at the page 6, the rear elevation, and then you look at this page, I'm sorry. That may not be part of your submission. This bit was provided tonight as a handout.
Right.
Where it says existing porch, I guess I'm not understanding your answer to what Julie asked, but the part this drawing, this part to what would be to the east, is that existing now?
I'm sorry, which part?
This 2-story part here.
So it's 1 story now. So in essence, if I take away that first floor, that's what's there. The existing home is this part, and that's a porch on the existing
I see.
home right now, and there's a deck there as well.
So this is a first floor porch here, it currently exists.
That's correct.
Okay.
questions, Dave? Any other questions?
So if I could follow up, Mr. Meter, you could raise the house in its current location, but you wouldn't have room for this addition that you're proposing to do, is that right?
So you couldn't raise the house in its current location without moving it, raise it up a story without moving it to the setback, as I understand it, if that's correct.
John, any thoughts?
Any home that is considered non-conforming, in a flood zone, it is allowed to be able to be elevated to the level that FEMA states it can be. Ooh, excuse me. This particular home is in a flood zone X, which simply means flood insurance is not required. It's not in a what's called a special flood hazard area that FEMA has designated and stated you're going to be flooded regardless if there's a weather event. So the town does allow homes to be raised in its current location. Any new construction, any changes to the structure must then be conforming to the current setbacks. Whether it's an addition, it's a deck, stairs, anything of that nature, those items then must be conforming to the current required setbacks.
Okay, so basically, this house could not be raised under those because of the requirements that it would have to be conforming in it. It would not be if they just simply raised it up.
And in the current state as it is right now, yes, it could be.
No, it
Okay,
could be raised, but there wouldn't be
the addition that
the
they're proposing.
addition.
I gotcha.
I think there's no room for the addition.
What you see, can I show this? Okay. This is a picture of the posting that I did when I posted the sign on August 25th. And this shows what the house looked like then, and it hasn't changed at all. So therefore, according to what you see from these pictures, which is page 5 and 6, those are what are called elevations. They're drawings and sketches of what the outside of the house would potentially look like. And that's part of a set of plans, blueprints that would need to be submitted for plan review and proceed on. So then, according to this page 5 and 6, this area right here would have the addition, new addition, being put to the house. Now, if any of this is not conforming to the current setbacks, this new part right here, then it could not be built. It would not be allowed. This part is existing. We're not going to make them tear it down. But this part would be an addition considered new construction, and all new construction must comply with the current zoning codes and setbacks.
In the absence of a variance from this.
Yes,
right?
yes, that's right.
But also for clarity on that east side though, where you're looking at that porch on there, that presently, there's parking on there, there's probably, not on the other side.
Oh,
on
the
the
side,
east side,
sorry.
yeah. So right now where that porch is, it's pretty far from the property line. I mean, there's sufficient room there to the property line. Again, one of the objectives was just to make the entire residence conforming. And that's where we get into the problem. Well, we're moving to make it conforming on the west side and on the northeast side.
So if anything, I mean, if I'm understanding correctly, you're pushing it closer to Route 1, not closer to your neighbors.
That's correct.
Okay, anybody else? No? Okay.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Who is this?
Yeah, my name is Justin Duhane. I'm the owner of the house next door.
Okay, we're not to public comment yet. We're just hearing from, so you'll have an opportunity to speak, once we get through that. I'll let you know.
Right.
Okay,
Do you want-
so if you have nothing else, then thank you for your testimony, and we'll ask if there's anything else that wishes to testify in favor of this application.
Do you want to say anything? I think you covered it, yeah.
Could I have this basic question?
Of course.
The little lot that is closer to Route 1, that ownership, do we know who that owner is?
Yes, we do. It's owned,
Go ahead.
it's owned by the town of Dewey Beach.
Okay.
And that's law that you said earlier cannot be built on, correct?
That is correct. It's right around 600 square feet. It's just there.
Mr. Beer, could I ask you to answer a couple more questions before I let you go? So do you mind returning? So just for the record, could you tell the board what the square footage is of the existing property, what you propose in the way of an addition, and why you need it?
So with respect to the square footage of the existing property, so I'd go back to the diagram, because I think it's a pretty good representation. The diagram on page 4, right, which shows a typical lot on the left, and then our property on the right there, and that property is 3,589 square feet versus a typical lot, which is 5,000 square feet.
Right, I'm asking about the square footage of the existing structure, not the
Oh,
lot.
sorry.
That's all right.
The existing structure, I believe, is probably close to 1,800, 2,000 square feet, I think.
Thank you. And what do you propose, or how many bedrooms are in the existing structure?
There's 3 bedrooms in the existing structure.
And what are you proposing for the addition?
So we haven't mapped it out yet, right? We've had some discussions about it, and those are the sketches in there, the elevations that we mentioned. So I don't have an end square footage. It's not, I would envision something, if we'll just add another floor to this, right? Or expand it slightly, not more than 2,500, maybe 2,800 tops, I think. I mean, I think that's gonna be probably the maximum considered the duration of the variance, and then also, again, making the existing residence conforming on all sides.
Well, it's not going to be conforming on the highway side, right?
Well, it will be conforming on the assumption that the variance is granted, that it will be conforming, right? It's
So-
not conforming now on the highway side because of where that porch is.
Okay.
So it's I think it's 6.2 feet from the corner of the structure on the northeast to the property line. Right now, the existing structure.
So your obligation here is to persuade the board to believe that that you're making a normal improvement, and that you're faced with an exceptional practical difficulty in doing that as a result of this unique lot, or this lot with its special dimensions, which you have pointed out. Why is it that you need, could you tell the board why you need the addition to be the size that you're proposing? Why can you build an addition in that area without requesting a variance?
No, because of the rear property line being 52% longer than typical property line, right? And then the setback associated with the rear property line. So the answer to that is no, right? The existing structure as it stands, as mentioned in that corner of the back porch, is roughly 6 feet from that rear property line right now. So if I look at that, and that would be half of what is the rear setback, right? I believe the rear setback is 12 feet. So that corner there is half of that right now.
So what does this red line indicate here? Is that a 12-foot setback? Is that what that's indicating, or is that indicating the desired 5-foot setback? Do you know what I'm looking at?
No, on the foresight, there would be nothing there other than that's a survey. There wouldn't be any lines on there that would have been something that I would have put in there, or any building lines. So that survey was, I forget what year it was, this is in 2019.
So you're really not changing the footprint at all, you're just seeking a variance to allow, for the improvements you need to make on the existing footprint.
And make the home conforming on all sides, that's something that I talked about and met with Dawn and Jim about, right? So this is one of the things, again, with their guidance, we were looking at the existing structure and how to make that conforming. And that's how we arrived at the 7-foot variance.
So are you proposing to enclose the existing porch as your addition
That's correct.
and not to move it any nearer to the road?
Well, it would have to move to be conforming on the left side.
On the left side?
On the west side, sorry. Right, so on the west side now, and then again, in the diagram, you have the foresight survey, you can't see very clearly the distances on the left side. However, it's non-conforming on the left side as it exists currently.
So that's just an 8-foot setback, correct?
That's correct.
And the bridge is small.
And it's 5 foot now from the side of the residence to the property line.
Right.
I have nothing more. Thanks.
Did that raise any more questions from either of you?
No question.
Okay, thanks.
I guess we'll ask if there's anyone else here in favor of the application who wishes to give testimony. And that would extend to anyone
On the
listening.
phone, yeah. Is anyone in favor that would like to speak on behalf of this variance on the phones? Okay, so I guess we'll go to anyone opposed. So is there anyone that, well, I'll start with the room first. Is there anyone here in person that would like to speak against the variance request? No? Okay, how about on the phones? Is there anyone who would like to speak with regard to the variance?
Yes, I would.
Okay, and your name again, sir? Yep,
Justin Duhane.
okay.
Mr. Dehane,
Hang on, wait a second.
Mr. Dehane, could you give us your address, please?
Yes, 111 Houston Street.
And sir, do you affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, great. I've been an owner 15 years. Been coming there my entire life. Anyway, we've owned the home for the last 15 years, and you may know we recently tore down and rebuilt. So we worked within the existing guidelines of the town and county. And I didn't actually see the posting of this. I was told by a neighbor. So anyway, I wanted to attend tonight. I submitted my letter as well. I was told by someone that this was a hardship situation. And I'm listening in now and I'm trying to figure out the hardship. So if it's in need of building more space, I was told it was the foundation. So originally I submitted my letter based on that. The building setbacks have been established years ago. The building's proximity to my home is fully acceptable to me. I've never voiced any concern over the home's location relative to my home. If the applicant's plan is to lift the structure, replace the foundation because there's hardship there, that's fine. If the applicant's plan to use the foundation issues or any other issues, as a hardship to relocate or build additional structures, I kind of question it just because it affects me, right? And the town setbacks and the way it stands today currently. If I heard Dawn right a little while ago, she mentioned that there couldn't be any changes to the existing unless this board approves some sort of new setback based on the hardship today. Did I hear that correctly?
Correct, we'd have to approve the variance in order for them to do their the proposed moving of the current structure to raise and fix the foundation and raise the property.
Okay, right. So, I have no problem with fixing the foundation, putting the house where it is. It sounds to me like a hardship is, interest in going up and out, closer to Route 1 maybe. Honestly, if I could go back, I would have had a similar application because I border Route 1 on the corner as well. So anyway, I just want to put on record, the current setbacks are no problem to me whatsoever.
Okay.
So, Mr. Dehane, are you referring to the 5 foot? Are you referring to the fact that the existing home is just 5 feet from your home or from your boundary line?
Right. That's right. It's 5 feet, which is more than enough. I believe we're 8 feet on the other side. I believe there's a porch and a deck on the other side that borders one that has referenced here on the call. As it sits today, we realize it's the way the shape of the lot is, but the structure as it sits and the setback is completely fine with me. I was under the impression the foundation needed to be repaired and replaced back, and I have no problem with that.
Okay.
Mr. Dehane, you heard, well, I should mention one thing first. You indicated that you submitted a letter, but the board doesn't, I don't believe the board has that letter. Would you make this your opportunity to express yourself to the board?
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure, I sent the letter yesterday, and it was confirmed it was received and sent to the board, but I can resend it, and I would say, yeah, my testimony here is how I feel. The letter starts off with the hardship around the foundation, because that's what I was told. I had a gut feeling it might be something different, and it kind of become true here. It's really about, something else. So you can take my testimony today as is.
Well, this board is going to make a decision or is very well may make a decision on the application here tonight shortly. So if there's anything that's in that letter that you haven't stated that you wish this board to consider, I would ask you to state it here now.
Okay, I'll read it now. Chairperson and board members, I am writing to voice my opposition to the variance request submitted for 109 Houston Street. I understand the variance is being requested based on hardship due to a deteriorating foundation. My first point is to inquire if the applicant has submitted to the Board of Adjustment a written report from a licensed engineer describing the extent of the deterioration of the foundation and a determination if the damage could be mitigated without relocating the structure. My second point is to inquire if a site plan has been submitted for the property detailing the changes to the building's location and height. The building's existing setbacks have been established years ago. The building's proximity to my home is fully acceptable to me. I have never voiced any concern over the home's location relative to my home. If the applicant's plan is to lift the structure, replace the foundation, then reset the structure in its original location, I have no objection to the temporary lifting and perhaps temporary relocation of the structure to accomplish this. If the applicant's plan is to use the foundation issues as a perceived hardship to relocate and perhaps lift the structure, then I feel the lot is not of sufficient size to accommodate these plans. Furthermore, I worry that what is really being asked for is a kind of a blank approval of whatever they or a purchaser might choose to do with the lot in the future. Approval of this variance without attaching restriction to control future development of the lot is a potential problem. In closing, if you have not received, the engineering and site planning for the property, I would ask you to potentially table this decision until they've been addressed. Sincerely, Justin Duhane. That's the letter on record.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any questions for Mr. Dehane?
Do you have any questions?
Is there anyone else on the line as well?
We're getting there. Hang on.
Okay.
We're just waiting. I'm just checking with the other committee members to see if there are any questions.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
And my understanding from what has been proposed is that the current structure would actually move further away from your property, not closer to it,
By 3 feet.
by 3 feet. You understand? That's what's being proposed. So it doesn't, as far as that's concerned, it affects the property line more along Route 1 and on the east side of the building, not the west side. I just want to make sure that we're all clear, because I know I was confused at first, so I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
I get that. I wonder though, in the movement of the property, if you gain more, if the structure can be changed. Can you build now on the east side and up, which was referenced earlier, or is it still what Don referenced, which is the structure cannot be changed, you would just sit farther over on the east side?
Well, and I think, I guess there are two parts, and Fred, correct me if I'm wrong, but the purpose of this meeting is to just vote potentially on whether or not to allow a variance. Then the next step would be, if it's allowed, then the property owners would have to submit plans with regard to the building application and do that. So we're not there yet. This is a multi-step process. So whatever the homeowner's intent is, that any building or any building plans would still have to be approved in a separate meeting or approved by the town. So they're not all the same thing. So I just want to kind of make that clear as well.
I think that's a correct statement, and that's an appropriate statement to make. What the applicant is seeking is to change that rear yard setback from 12 to 5 feet. So what the effect that has is it increases the building envelope somewhat and gives the applicant some flexibility in terms of constructing new improvements. I think that's an appropriate way to look at it. It is not before this board to decide whether the specific plans, which actually have not been offered, are pleasing to the board or appropriate. That's a job for the building official who will apply the zoning code and other criteria to a subsequent application. This applicant is not bound by any of the statements that it's made with regard to its future plans. It's simply seeking to reduce the rear yard setback from 12 to 5, which has the effect of increasing the building envelope and giving the applicant some flexibility. And I believe the applicant is saying that because the property is bordering along coastal highway, because of a sidewalk, and because there's no neighbors close on that side, that there's no harm that's being done. I think that's a fair interpretation of what Mr. Meter's testimony consists of with regard to that point.
Based on those comments, do you have anything else to say, sir?
I understood that. I was just wondering if that's a hardship, and if that footprint, based on that, to accommodate, I don't know, a couple feet, which I don't mind the way it is now, if that's, I'm just trying to figure out the hardship in that, to then have a larger footprint to make changes to the structure going up and out, closer to Route 1. So anyway, I just thought I'd again mention that.
Well, we appreciate your comments. Hey, yes, who is this?
My name is Daniel Reed. I am Justin Newhave's father-in-law, and so the property address impacted by this committee is still on Houston.
Okay, wait, before you begin, we need to swear you in.
So, Mr. Reed, did you give us your address or your son's address? What's your address, sir?
111 Houston Street, Dewey Beach, Delaware.
Mr. Reed, is that right? Did I get that right? Mr. Reed, do you affirm the testimony? Do you affirm the testimony you give in this proceeding is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, so help me out.
Please proceed.
My important request would be is that I'm here, Virginia and understand that some properties do suffer from deterioration. I'm listening to the applicants who want to go up and back and out. And but I also hear that it's already a 3-bedroom structure, that it already has a limited footprint on the Houston Street. And I just question, the one thing I'm thinking of is that in increasing basically the non-conformity of the structure by variance, are you increasing the potential parking load on Houston for one thing, which, I haven't heard what the additional space would be used for, but I guess a logical assumption would be at least a portion of it would be bedrooms or a bedroom. I don't know what the impact would be, but it does seem to me that, I can understand, and my son-in-law said, lift it, fix it, put it back, that makes sense. I can understand that perhaps there's some ability to work within the system to do something different, but my thought is jamming it back in the corner of that lot, reducing the slight amount of green space on that lot is not conducive. We just went through it at 111. We had to create a grassed and shrubbed area within the lot. It would have been a whole lot nicer to take pea gravel all the way around the property, but didn't do that. In compliance with the town, the natural space was created on one side. This is removing natural space. It's making it almost non-existent. And so I guess that to me is another detriment to the variance. As Justin did say, he was concerned that future development, there's no, it sounds all one month, we just want a variance, we just want to do more space here, but, that's not a guarantee. If there were a site plan being submitted along with the drawing saying, this is exactly what's going to happen to the building, this is exactly what's going to be there when we're done, that would be nice, but to create a variance in the vacuum on the potential of what might happen, to me, I'd like to speak against. So that's my input as a family member that felt at least slightly impacted by this. Thank you for listening. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Is there anyone else on the phone that would like to speak? Oh, sorry, any questions? Anyone else on the phone that would like to speak? Okay. And I'm just gonna, for those of you in the room, I'll give you one more shot. I'm sorry, someone there? Someone there? Hello? You can put yourself, okay, can you put yourself on mute so we can't hear you anymore since you're done? Because otherwise I don't know. Okay, and I will say, there was one email that was sent to the town by Mr. Moskowitz. And I'll just quote his email. It just says, the Board of Adjustment should only consider true hardships. This is not a hardship. Just because you have a parcel that's smaller than a typical lot, you don't get smaller setbacks that infringe on your neighbors and or the thoroughfare. So that was Mr. Moskowitz's comment. So with that, do we have any more public comments? Looks like I'll give one last call for anybody on the phone.
If I could comment on one thing, some of the testimony we heard in opposition was based on not knowing exactly what it is that the applicant seeks to do. The applicant is not required to know at this point in time what it is exactly they wish to do in terms of redeveloping or developing this property further. The applicant is seeking some relief from the rear yard setback, which they indicated creates an exceptional practice, or creates a difficulty for them in terms of making normal improvements to the property. So it is not a deficiency on the applicant's part that they're not representing exactly what it is that they propose to do. That's a process that follows. What you're being asked to do is whether it is to determine whether it's been justified that because of the configuration of this lot, the larger rear yard and the reduced building envelope that's available is that an appropriate justification? Does that create an exceptional practical difficulty for the applicant in developing this property further?
Thank you. Okay, since it looks like we are done with, Mr. Meter.
So another question, just for clarity on the height, there was a reference to the height. So the way the house is now, it could be 35.
I don't know if you could be heard, so.
If you want to for clarification.
Oh, no, that's fine. I just wanted to.
Oh, be heard now, okay, I was confused, sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. So for clarification, there was a point made about the height, right? And so that the way the residence is now, you could build it to 35 feet. Because that's the elevation, correct?
I think that was a point that was made early on, that the property could be raised in its current configuration to allow for a reconstruction of the foundation without the need for any additional variances, so long as you're not changing the footprint of the property. You're asking for relief in order to change the footprint somewhat, or move
Move the footprint.
Yeah.
Right, that's correct. So, the hardship is around the lot size, right? The foundation is a piece of that, absolutely an aspect of that. But for sure, just as my neighbor, if I had a 50 by 100 lot and it was a typical lot, I wouldn't be asking for a variance. But I don't have a lot that's, 30% smaller than that. So it presents an issue.
Thank you. So let me get back to the agenda here. Okay, since there are no more public comments, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing at this point. We're going to move on and discuss and possibly vote on this application for variance. So, Fred, before the committee members start to discuss, is there anything you want to make sure we're aware of or based on our conversations?
I'm not going to repeat it in full, but I would just caution you against relying on considerations that aren't within those four that I gave you, which again are the zoning district, the character of the area, whether there's any harm being done to whether there's not any harm, but whether there's substantial, let me rephrase that. Whether the relief from the restriction creates or has any serious effect on neighboring properties, that's the third consideration. And the final consideration is whether the property owner is confronted with an exceptional practical difficulty in terms of making normal improvements to the property. And I think you all understand consequences of that. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Okay, Dave, would you like to start? Any of your thoughts on this?
Well, I guess when looking at sort of Mr. Mader's analysis here, where the lot is 28% smaller, and so he's saying that it's 33% versus 47%, but that's only 14% difference, and his lot is 28% smaller. So I guess the part about exceptional, if the lot is that percentage smaller, and what you're allowing is actually more than that percentage smaller, I don't really understand the exceptional problem. I mean, I do in terms of looking at what they want to do, but just in terms of an equity, if the argument is an equity one, it seems to me that having it reduced to 33.5% is not any greater than the difference in the size of the lot.
Okay, what numbers are you looking at again?
This is on page 2 of
Okay.
6.
Yeah, let me just make sure I'm on the same page as you. And so what numbers are you referencing? That it's 20%, I get that it's 20% smaller than a typical lot.
Right.
And then what's the,
But then at the end of that paragraph, he's saying that it's, the buildable area is 33.5% as opposed to 47%. Well, the difference in those two numbers is only 14%.
I see what you're saying.
Now, in terms of the exceptional, I don't have a clear understanding of what an exceptional difficulty is, but it does seem that if there's been a house there and it's been a 3-bedroom house that's been usable and whatever, then I'm not really understanding what the exceptional difficulty is.
I guess where I see as I see it, the exception is because of it's not just the size of the lot, it's the shape of the lot. Because even though you're right, the numbers are different, 28% smaller versus, the 14%, that this shape, I think, really infringes on what can be built on that property. If you're looking at raw numbers, yeah, you're right. But I think when you're looking at, if you look at the shape of the lot, I think it is an extremely unique shaped property, which I think does create some difficulties for trying to make improvements. Bill, your thoughts? Okay.
I agree.
Okay. Anything else?
I think anything he's gonna do is gonna enhance the value of the property and the value of the properties around.
Right.
And it's not gonna be a use, you got a fence up there now and then a sidewalk, it's not going any further either way.
Right.
So what harm is it doing to it?
Well, and that was my other point
I've
is that,
been there 3 times,
right.
okay? And I'm trying to make sure that this is right. And I got here and I said, huh? And I said, no, when you look at the whole picture of what is it going to do for Dewey?
Right.
And it's going to be a plus. It's really going to be a plus. It's not going to be something that's halfway done and all this stuff. It's going to be a whole different thing.
Right.
It just comes close to the road, that's all.
Well, it comes close to the road and it comes closer to the property that's
Yeah.
not buildable, that's owned by the town. So if anything, it benefits the neighbors to the west because there's more, they actually are gonna get more space between the property line and the building structure.
I've had 3 years to think about these things. Anyway, to me, it's what is going to enhance Dewey and what's going to work for Dewey. There's some other ones across the road from him that have done a whole hodgepodge of stuff and said, we're not going to do this, and then they don't come before a board. They just do this and that, and just an outside shower, yeah, and then it's the sleeps too, downstairs. I mean, I've been coming to Dewey since I was 7 years old. I've owned the property for 50-some years. I'm in the Bayside Court, and I've been there 22 years now. And I've seen a lot of changes, and they're all positive, and I think this is a positive change.
Okay. Well, I want to kind of redirect us back to.
I started out thinking the other way, but that's why I never make decisions until the very last.
Yep, it's like you're, doing my job, you have to convince a 12-person jury.
I'm now wearing hearing aid. The one I have is broke, and this one here is, I guess some kids use it, I don't know.
Well, let me go ahead and redirect kind of because of what we need to talk about. And I think, the points are all valid. The nature of the zoning, we know that it's at the NR zone, the characteristics and the uses, and obviously this is residential and the property doesn't directly abut, the back line of the property directly abuts Route 1, but then it has the neighboring property that also against Route 1. And I'll note too, the other side of Houston Street is actually RR, not NR. Not that that makes a huge difference, but just, we're getting, Houston Street kind of starts the beginning of where we come into the business area of the town. So, and as far as the removal of the restrictions affecting neighbors, as I think it's become clear and as we've discussed now, if anything, the closest neighbor, who's the next door neighbor at 111, if anything, he benefits from the structure being moved further from the property line versus closer to the property line by this variance. And jump in anytime if you don't disagree with me.
Well, I've been through there several times,
Right.
you know, and everything is all like this, the that whole section,
Right,
you know. And, you know what you're getting when you got it.
right. Well, and as Mr. Meter said, the property's been owned for a lot of years in their family, so, and things were not zoned the way they currently are when the property was purchased back in the day, so to speak. So,
I can speak, I live at Bayside Court. I bought my property for $132,000 in 1999. It's now worth $840 some thousand. I've got 9 people that want to buy my property. I own the land it's on, it's the biggie. I don't know what you do. You don't own the land, that's the biggie. You own the land. But, and I've been a homeowner president for 9 years and all those stuff, and started a lot of stuff. If you're familiar with Bayside Court, I'm the one that started the American flag. I'm the one that started the window boxes on the railings. And the strawberries that,
Yeah.
wood.
okay, that's good.
Right,
I appreciate all you've done, Phil.
okay.
Let's get back
But
to
that's that. But this does the same thing with this property. He can, he enhances this, then everybody else is going to enhance too, and it's going to do nothing but be a plus for that area and make it go up.
And as far as,
I disagree.
excuse me, sir, the public meeting is closed. You can, you're not allowed to comment, this is just for the board discussion. As far as the hardship, obviously, you know, there are options, or potentially options with this foundation, but we're not, I do think there is a hardship based on, not because of the foundation necessarily, but because of the shape of this property specifically. I mean, it's very unique, it's a very unique shaped property.
It took me 4 times to find it.
So all those properties that are kind of along the angle, as I like to call it, coming into town that are right there against the highway, have unique things that I think the town, that need to be considered. So anything else anybody wants to say?
Well, the standard that you just expressed, again, is not what I thought that Mr. Upton expressed, which was that the denial would cause exceptional difficulty, as opposed to what would be minimally necessary to develop the property. And I think you used a different standard when you were talking then.
Oh, Fred, do you want to talk?
Okay, so I'm gonna read the nutshell version of this quick check case, which is the operative case, and then I'll invite you to ask questions of me. So the final of the 4 standards, I think, is the one that you were questioning, which is whether failure to remove the restrictions creates an unnecessary hardship or exceptional practical difficulty for the owner in relation to the owner's efforts to make normal improvements to the property. So there's a context there. The context is the owner wants to make improvements to the property. And your task to determine whether these are normal improvements or whether they're out of place or whether they're overly auspicious or overly aggressive. Are they normal or are they overreaching? So that factor is satisfied only when the difficulties alleged are practical rather than theoretical, and exceptional rather than routine. Exceptional means significant, not just, gee, I would like the law to be different, but I've got a significant problem doing what I'd like to do, and what I'd like to do, in my view, is normal in making improvements to the property. And then finally, it is this standard where the board considers whether the applicant is asking for more relief than they need to alleviate the difficulty that they're asserting. So if you think they're asking for too much, this is the standard that you would determine that they did not meet.
Well, we don't know unless this is something that the things that look at whether a lesser variance would satisfy the need either. All we're looking at is this taking 7 feet, going from 12 feet to 5 feet. I mean, there's no discussion of any other number. So it's really hard for me to know what's minimally necessary or what's exceptional, not knowing what other variance options there might be.
So one of the considerations is the 7 to 5 includes moving the structure from a non-conforming position against that western boundary line to a conforming position. So there's 3 feet there. So if you're looking at the 7, if you're comparing the 7 to the, the 12 to the 5, then you need to take into consideration that there's 3 feet that the owner is giving up that they currently occupy.
And that's, I mean, I think that's the one thing that I'm considering is the fact that the footprint of the property is not going to change. We're just basically moving the footprint over, creates a conforming side of the property on the west side of the property, and the sides that are impacted where the variance is being requested are against Route 1 and against a property that are not, that's not buildable. So when I look at it in light of that, it doesn't affect the neighbors from that standpoint. And as far as, I think structural issues and foundational issues are normal things that want to be improved on. And if as part of that, they want to improve the property to add some space, again, not really our job to figure out what they're going to do. It's just whether or not we grant this variance to give them some room to wiggle, so to speak, to try to improve the property going forward. And that's kind of the way I look at it. Any other thoughts, Dave?
I guess the only question I would have is when the thread had asked about how much additional space would be added to this house, as I understood, it was 18 to 2,000 square feet now, and how much was going to be added? Was it going to total 2,800 or 2,800 feet?
I think Mr. Meter wasn't quite sure because he didn't have the exact dimensions of, what the space on the first, what that footprint of the first floor is like. He was kind of guesstimating, I got the impression. So we're not,
Right.
we don't know for sure. And again, that's something for the building code folks to look at and decide if the plans that they submit comply within those regulations. Our only job is to determine whether the variance is acceptable under the rules of
Or whether it would be a normal improvement.
normal
And you're not, saying whether you're increasing the size by a third or a half, whether that's a normal improvement. That's something we would take into account.
you could, yeah, but again, we don't have the final plans of what their final, what those construction submissions are. We're just looking at strictly the variance. So, any other thoughts? Okay, let's see, I can make sure I get this right. I keep my agenda keeps going down. So I need to extend my sleep time window. Okay, so do I have a motion to vote on the application for the variance pursuant to section 185-66C, paren 1 of the Dewey Beach zoning code to reduce the 12-foot rear yard setback from 12 feet to 5 feet on parcel 3-34-20.14-75, which is actually the correct parcel number, .00, located at 109 Houston Street. The property is in the N-owned zoning district. The variance is requested by Aaron Meter, trustee of the Jane M. Meter Irrevocable Trust, owner of the property. Do I have a motion with regard to that?
No motion.
Okay, do I have a second? Second, okay. All in favor of approving the variance, say aye. I'll go. Sorry.
Yeah, so, I think it's appropriate, yeah, you want to do a roll call
Okay,
on this
that's,
one.
I was just gonna
Right.
think that.
Because we need to hear your justifications for your vote, and you can make reference to remarks that you've already made or concerns that you already addressed in supporting your vote.
So, yea or nay, Dave?
I'm
Your reasoning.
gonna nay, and to the extent that I understand it, it doesn't seem to me that it meets the exceptional difficulty provision of the standard of review that we're asked to look at.
Is there anything more you want to add to that? No, okay, thank you.
Phil, yea or nay?
No, I'm forward.
I'm sorry,
He's
you're for it? Okay, you said no, I'm for it. You made me confused.
I'm ahead of it.
Okay, so you're yay. And do you have any reasoning?
I think, anything to make Julie better is fine.
Okay.
Really.
And I vote yay based on the
You
reasoning.
know, we give you a.
Well, let's stick to this property.
Okay.
Okay. And I vote yay, based on the comments that I made before, that I do believe that the characteristic of the shape of this property does create unique difficulties for improvements, specifically, and therefore I vote yay. So we did the roll, so now what am I missing, Fred?
So the variance is granted, a decision will be issued within 30 days. And at this point, I think it's appropriate to ask for a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn,
A motion to adjourn.
yes, okay, second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Yep, thank you.
It's 8:33.